Right. Um, well, thank you so much, everyone, for the opportunity to meet with you tonight. One of the joys of this project that I'll be sharing with you all in the context of leadership is the way that it's allowed me to stay connected to Baltimore and the folks that I met there, like Sarah. When I met her through this project. And so to see it have a life beyond my time at the market, beyond even writing this book is really gratifying. So I know you are all already together, but I would like to take a moment just to arrive in the space together before we get started. So I'm going to be guiding us through a series of transition breaths. That'll be just take about a minute. It'll be three series of breaths. One will be a first series arriving with self. The second, letting go of anything that you don't want to take into our time together or an intention for our time together. And then arriving with community. This is an invitation, so you are free to participate or not. But if you are coming along for the ride, I invite you to take a moment and get comfortable either to get comfortable how you're seated, and you can either close your eyes or softly lower your gaze. So we'll be doing about three breaths for each round. I will be indicating when we are transitioning into the next series of breaths. So on your next inhale, you'll be taking breaths for arriving with self. And on your next series of breaths, thinking about something you want to let go of or an intention that you want to set for our time together. And on your last series of breaths, arriving with community. All right. And if you had your eyes closed or gaze lowered, you can open your eyes and we've arrived together. So, our time today, I'm going to start sharing my screen now. And can you see my screen, Sarah?
Yeah.
Okay. So, how will we be spending our time? We've already done the arrival. I'll be going over the intention for the workshop today, asking you all to do some reflection. I'll go into a deeper dive into introducing myself, and then we'll dive into the challenging different models of leadership, how I see this project within the lens of leadership, and then we will end with some time for Q&A. Also, I'm going to try to keep an eye on the time, but Sarah, if I am like horribly off base, please feel free to flag me.
That's good.
All right. So my intention for our time together today is to, based on conversations with Sarah, defining leadership outside of a structured environment, and in particular outside of the structured environment of Johns Hopkins Homewood campus. Um, so I'd like you to take like 2 minutes and reflect on these questions. What and who was your entry point into leadership? And what is a leadership position you hold now? And how did you come to hold that position? So take about 2 minutes, and then I'll ask for about two or three folks to volunteer and share their answers.
Hi, Megan. I'll just come up to the Zoom.
Yeah, please. Thank you.
I'm Bryce. I've been a swimmer my whole life, so I feel like my entry point into leadership was like the coaches and older kids that I had on my teams throughout the way. Um, like specifically when I got here to college, there was a senior who kind of took me under his wing and
Mm,
taught me a lot of things that he knows. And now that I'm a junior, I feel like I'm in a similar situation where we have like some good freshmen coming in. So I feel like I can be a leader for them. Um,
mm,
let's see. Yeah, like how I came to that position, I feel like I just recognized that when I was younger or less experienced that, and even in school too, there were people that I looked up to that had more experience than me. And now that I have more experience, I feel like it's my duty to uh, help them out and mentor them.
mm. So you're able to pass on the experience that you had with some mentors of yours.
Right.
That's wonderful. Thanks for sharing that, Bryce. Anyone else like to share their reflections?
There's someone walking over.
Say it again.
Someone's walking over.
Okay, great.
Hello, I'm Max. I'm a junior studying veterinary medicine here. And I would say a good entry into leadership came from my theater community in high school.
Mm,
Um, they taught me that everyone's a leader in a production, and you kind of have to know your role and help guide others toward a
mm,
shared interest. And that sort of instilled in me a sense of responsibility, confidence, and autonomy. So I carried that into college, and now I'm an event planner for my major. And surprisingly, that shared a lot of the qualities that I've experienced throughout my time in high school. You
mm.
need to know what you're doing. You need to work together with others. You need to be a team player, and you have to do your job on your own. There's no one that's going to tell you to set up these things. You just kind of have to be independent and get the job done yourself. And
Mhm.
I felt like both of those roles have carried with me up until this point.
Hmm. Thank you for sharing that, Max.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was my entry point into leadership, but definitely into community was my theater community in high
Mm.
school. So I resonate with with that feeling of being part of a larger production and everyone having their part to play and needing to take responsibility for their own part. So thank you both, Max and Bryce, for sharing.
Thank you.
I think that there's themes that you both touched on that will resonate with what I share later in the presentation. So a little bit more about me. My name's Megan Lovely. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm currently living in Rochester, but I was living in Baltimore from 2021 to 2024. I was there primarily, I moved to Baltimore to get my MFA in theater at Towson University. And, but I ended up staying, I graduated, finished my degree in 22, and then ended up staying for another 2 years, really because of the people that I met in Baltimore and the community that I started to form there. So for my MFA program, it was very laboratory based, hands on, and it required a public facing thesis. And I knew that I wanted to partner with the local community in some way, which would require a leadership position and that I was initiating a project. But I was challenging about questioning how do I navigate this as a new member to a community, especially as a white woman in a hyper segregated city such as Baltimore. And so this actually became the question of my thesis. um, there's this civil rights activist and artist named John O'Neill. He was a co-founder of the Free Southern Theater and Junebug Productions, and he was really influential to me when I learned about him in grad school. And he talked about how he said, quote, the artist symbolizes the individual within the context of a dynamic relationship with a community. So he was really looking at what is that relationship of an artist to a community. And I also learned about this theater festival called the American Festival Project, which was a festival that gathered theater artists and companies across the country who shared a commitment to using theater for social change. And so the American Festival Project artists were asking, how does one culture or community encounter another? And then through this and then I translated that to say, okay, and related to my work in Baltimore, how am I encountering the community of Baltimore? So in preparing for tonight's workshop, I was struggling a bit because I actually haven't thought that much about my work and through the lens of leadership. And I think that's because I've been stuck in these older models of leadership that are about more position oriented and having a position of authority, or you were taking charge on an initiative. And I learned about this in preparing for this because now my work is I'm working with the Center for Community at the University of Rochester, and we do a lot of work on community leadership in the context of community engagement. And one of the models that we base it off of is the social change model of leadership. This was developed for college students by an ensemble of leadership educators in 1996, based on the changing attitudes around leadership. So from those more individual positions of power and authority, this idea that leader is working towards an end goal that is productive, and instead shifting towards these collaborative relationships and shared values, and with the end goal, rather than being what you're producing, working towards social change. And learning about this helped me see this broader definition of leadership. But it was, it actually, like, what I need to do was contextualize it within, like, what was my reference points in terms of this work that I'd been doing through my thesis, through this project with the farmers market, which is how I came to know Sarah. And so one of the central texts to my thesis project was Emergent Strategy by Adrienne Maree Brown. And she defines emergence in several different ways. But one of them is that what feels most relevant to my work is the ways she quote, ways for humans to practice being in right relationship to our home and each other, to practice complexity, and to grow a compelling future together through relatively simple interactions. So, reading this, so as I learned social change model of leadership and then emergent strategy, starting to look at my work through like this Story Seeds project through the lens of of leadership, and particularly this idea of emergent leadership. So the Story Seeds project, I was exploring the idea of, how am I encountering the community of Baltimore? And I was working part-time at the farmers market throughout graduate school. And it was there that I really started to, because it was in the middle of the pandemic that I moved there, the market was really the only place that I was able to see people out in community. And it was here that I, through talking with the different vendors and talking with the customers that would come up to my stand that I was working at, that I started to form connections to the city and learn about the city and started to feel connected to my new home. And so I was curious, like, how does this role of exchanging stories encourage connection to our communities and encourage this investment back? And not just idea of, if you learn about the story behind a business, you're more likely to patron that business, but how does the act of storytelling actually help you feel more connected to a place and develop a stronger sense of social responsibility, and to this extent that you would want to be a leader? And so we started this field research really for my thesis. I set up a table at the farmers market, and I asked people to share a story with me that was related to the farmers market. And so I did this for 2 Saturdays in October of 2021. And then I ended up, and then this formed the basis for my thesis project, which was the story market, where I partnered with, it was over 12 artists, nonprofits, farmers, small businesses to tell the story of their organizations as particularly it related to Baltimore City's food environment and community created around the dinner table. And so after I finished graduate school, I ended up continuing this project just because I was so filled by the conversations that I was having with people. And I was working an administrative job at the time and didn't really have any space to create or to really be out in the community. Whereas I spent 2 years really because I was in graduate school, it was like my job to build community in Baltimore because that was the focus of my thesis. And so um, the over the course of between like April to December 2023, I was doing these story seeds stands monthly. And as they started to grow, I decided to display them on a bulletin board so that people could see their stories in relationship to other people's stories. And that's where when the project really took off, because now people saw their stories in relationship to this greater story that was being told. And it was at one of these stands that I met Sarah, that I met Sarah, and I actually met a lot of different Johns Hopkins University students through doing this project. I'll go back to this slide in a moment, but these are some seeds that different students made. The ones on the left here, one of these is Sarah's, and she came up with a group of students that was part of her first year orientation, and they made seeds to commemorate their first time at the market. This middle one was a student who was writing a paper about self-actualization. And so we had a really deep conversation about what self-actualization means. And then these were from a group of students who were living in Baltimore over the summer as part of the, their TAs for I'm blanking on the name of it now, but this like Center for Youth, Johns Hopkins Center for Youth or something. And so they all made seeds to commemorate their time there. And what struck me is that, and Sarah and I had a really long conversation about this, but the ways in which getting out into the community shifted the students' perceptions of Baltimore. And especially when a city like Baltimore, with its hypersegregation, with its crime, there's all these headlines that if you were just to read that and they prompt this fear of getting off campus. And actually, when you're out in the community, like you see the people who are choosing to make a life here and the ways that getting out actually made them feel more connected to the place that they were living for 4 years. Some other seeds that people shared was they really ranged from, it was people's first time at the farmer's market to the 633rd time, the joys and patience of seasonal eating to recipe inspiration, things that reminded them of home, like finding chai tea or finding empanadas or to trying a new type of berry. And then people who met up with family every weekend there, or acts of kindness from a stranger. So these are just two other seeds featured here. One that was highlighted is that you don't have to make an appointment to meet anyone at the market. You can just show up and be. And so even if you don't have anyone that you're planning to go with, you encounter people. And in that, just encountering people, really building this stronger sense of community. Ray Oldenburg coined the term the third space to describe those places outside of the first place, which is home, your second place, work, but those third places where it's a neutral ground, where you're not host, you're not having to be productive or produce anything, but it's just a place that you are able to be out and encounter people in community. And he said that the development of an informal public life depends on people getting out and engaging with each other outside of a cash nexus, which is also where I started to see this role of storytelling in building a stronger sense of and building these relationships that went beyond transactions. And then these are just a video of different seeds that are going to be featured in all of these seeds in a book that I'm writing based on all of the stories that were shared at the market over the course of the three and a half years. So going back to the story seeds as like in the context of leadership, and in particularly drawing on this definition of emergent strategy, the ways that I see story seeds being an emergent practice is number one, the fact that it encouraged market goers to reflect on their relationships to the farmers market and to Baltimore more broadly. And so that relates to this part of the definition that is emergent strategies, ways for humans to practice being in right relationship to our home and to each other. It addresses complexity, and that it emphasizes the range of reasons that people show up at the market. That was some people show up just for their groceries. Some people show up because it's social time. Some people show up because they're able to use their EBT benefits at the market. Others show up because it's really important to them to be able to shop organic, or because they have a strong relationship with a farmer. The reasons were wide and varied, and also the barriers to showing up. I think that's something I had to contend with when I was doing this project, is that community is not utopia. And so I think sometimes, like, especially I remember my first Saturday at the market, where it was the middle of the winter, and I walked down the street from my house and I got fresh apples and collard greens, and I was amazed that I could get this in the middle of the city, and I was building all these beautiful relationships with people. But then the more I showed up, starting to see the ways that this community was complex too, and thinking about, well, who is here, and why are they here, and why aren't they here, and where even is this city? Rather, where is the farmers market? There are several different terms to describe, like it might be called food deserts, healthy food priority areas, food apartheid. But looking at, the market is in a place that the giant supermarket, this is the 32nd Street Farmers Market. The giant supermarket is just right down the street from the farmers market. And so there is fresh food around there, where there's other pockets of the city where folks have to rely on going to corner stores to get their groceries because they don't have a car. So looking at and embracing the complexity of community. It's visioning and dream work. Going back to that social change model of leadership, it is envisioning and building a world that is building this world together. It is aiming for social change. It is, and so really directing our attention to, in this visioning and dreaming work, it's directing our attention to those interactions that are fostering the future that we all want to grow in together. The simple and repeatable one, I think, is one of the most important parts of Story Seeds and of thinking about leadership to me, because I think that leadership, sometimes we think about it in these big, grandiose terms. Like, it has to be this big project that you're initiating, and it has to, we have these positions of leadership. We're the president of something, or we're the captain of a sports team. But actually, you can be a leader with small actions. I know, Max, you were talking about in theater, and within theater, like, you have to, part of being a leadership and taking responsibility for your role is saying your lines every night. No matter how many lines you have, you're responsible for that. You are the leader of your role. And so, or, if you are working in the stage crew and you're responsible for setting all the props, making sure that is repeatable every night. And so in the context of Story Seeds, these weren't full-fledged stories that I was asking people to share. It was these moments of interaction, these moments that shimmered for them, that made them, that they remember this, an interaction, or an amazing first market tomato that they had. And really drawing emphasis to what are our habits of shopping. Why do we come here every week? What do we come here for? And really distilling down and bringing some greater intention to our daily and weekly habits. And then the last part is that it grows. And so this going back to the definition of emergent strategy, that it's growing a compelling future together. So I mentioned that one of the most gratifying parts of being able to share with you all tonight is that this opportunity grew out of an interaction that Sarah and I had at the farmers market back in September of 2022, three, I think. Yeah. And then we met, we chatted in January of 2024 to talk more about her first year. Now it's February of 2025. And so the fact that, what looking at this project and looking at leadership is something that goes beyond a single project or initiative or a vision, and something that both Max and Bryce, you've mentioned this passing on of knowledge and taking the torch from previous mentors and then inspiring the next generation of mentors and leaders. That is the work of a leader, and that you plant something that can grow into something that is larger than what you can even imagine. And that's the hope, I think, that is my hope with this Story Seeds project and the book that I'm now writing out of it, is that it grows and inspires others to continue this work and to spin it and adapt it to whatever context is relevant to them. So I want to transition now and to give us some time for some Q&A. So I'll give you all the floor.
I'm curious, like, how you plan on using the seeds in your book. I don't know where you are in the process, but like, how do you plan to kind of replicate this small scale of the seeds into something that could be like one big project that could go a lot further than just like the bulletin board?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Right now, like, it's the weaving together of the stories, looking for those common themes. I mean, there are over 200 stories seeds that I have, and then over 20 hours of recorded interviews. And so one of the challenges of synthesizing it is that there are stories that aren't going to be included in the book. And so it's just looking at this as one iteration of a project, and how I'm incorporating them is like, I do have some photographs of the seeds themselves when they are illustrating a story that I'm sharing. But it's really using the seeds to draw out these common themes, and it's within the context of a memoir of finding and building community in Baltimore through at the farmers market and through these storytelling engagements.
Do you want to come up with this?
Is there another question?
Someone asked, are you planning on continuing the Seeds project in New York?
Right now I'm experimenting with like adapting it for some of my students, and so looking at it, and particularly within the lens of community engagement experiences. And so I am now involved with the farmers market in Rochester through a like being on the steering committee, so like kind of working more behind the scenes. But what I like about the Story Seeds model is that it's so adaptable, and I've adapted it for several storytelling workshops. I've incorporated it into the classroom with my students, facilitated it at conferences, and so I'm continuing to explore different the topic of the seeds change, but still using this idea of these micro moments and these stories to start to illustrate these broader, like some broader themes and stories.
I actually had a question.
Mhm.
You mentioned how, oh, sorry, my name is Enoch. You mentioned how like the Seeds project kind of brings like kind of these organic, like unpredictable moments that build
Mhm.
community. I guess I had like a more like general question. Like, do you feel like these kind of moments are, increasingly becoming rarer? And like given like
Hmm.
I don't know, like how like digitized we are, and like kind of what do you think about that?
I think that like the fact that they're not as available because so much of our attention is absorbed and like by our screens and technology and just this culture of busyness, that the hunger for these interactions when the opportunity is provided is greater. And I mean, there were several, like, just even shopping at the farmers market, like there were several vendors and customers who just talked about the value of being able to see the person who they were buying for and it being so much more personable than clicking auto ship on Amazon Prime or online shopping. And I hope that there will always be that hunger. But I think that this is where like I had a hunger and a need for it, and so I created the space for it. And then I found that there were others who were hungry and needing it too. And so within the context of leadership, I would, sometimes we can't always see what it means for the bigger picture, like what it means to others until we're in it. And I think that's even like where I'm working on at this stage of the project now, writing the book and now having opportunities to present it in the context of leadership or to adapt it to other scenarios. That it's just now that I'm seeing all the different facets it has, where it really just came from this innate need to connect and create.
Thank you so much, Megan. Does anyone else have any other questions? All right, I think that about covers it, but thank you so much for coming to speak with us. I will email you with a brief follow-up after. Want to give her a round of applause?
Thank you all for your time. I would love to stay connected. I've shared, Sarah, feel free to share the PowerPoint slides. I have my email here, also links to my website, my blog, Instagram, and then where to find information about the upcoming book.
Amazing, absolutely.
All right, take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, thank you.